Okay, this is Tobacco Road by Erskine Caldwell, starting with chapter 4. I already uploaded chapters 1 to 3, so go check those out. Jeter carefully laid the pump aside and crept stealthily to the corner of the house. He propped his feet and leaned against the rotten weatherboards to wait. From where he stood, he could see everything. When Jeter looked straight ahead, Ellie Mae and Love were in full view, and if he had wanted to see Ada, he could have turned his head slightly and seen her standing on the porch. There was nothing for him to do now but wait. Love was moving farther and farther away from the sack. Ada once more rolled a snuff stick to the other corner of her mouth. She had been watching Love and Ellie Mae ever since they began getting together, and the closer they crawled to each other, the more calm she became. She was waiting, too, to ask Love to make Pearl come to see her soon. Pearl had not been there since the day she was married. Pearl was so much like Ada, in both appearance and behavior, that no one could have mistaken them for one another than mother and daughter. When Pearl married Love, Ada had told her she ought to run away from him before she began bearing children, and go to Augusta and live at the mills. Pearl, however, did not have the courage to run away alone. She was afraid. She didn't know what would happen to her in the cotton mills, and she was too young to understand the things she heard about life there. Even though she was between 12 and 13 years old, she was still afraid of the dark, and she often cried through most of the night as she lay trembling on her pallet on the floor. Love was in the room and the doors were closed, but the creep of darkness seemed to bring an unbearable feeling of strangulation. She had never told anyone how much she feared the dark nights, and no one had known why she cried so much. Love thought it had something to do with her mind. Dude did not have very much sense, and neither did one or two of the other children, and it was natural for him to think that Pearl was afflicted in the same way. The truth was, Pearl had far more sense than any of the Lesters, and that, like her hair and eyes, had been inherited from her father. The man who was her father had passed through the country one day and had never been seen since. He had told Ada that he came from Carolina and was on his way to Texas, and that was all she knew about him. Lately, however, Pearl was beginning to lose some of her fear. After 8 months in the house with Love, she had gradually grown braver, and she had even ventured to think that someday she could run away to Augusta. She didn't want to live on the sand ridge. The sight of the muddy savanna swamps on one side and the dusky black structure of the coal chute on the other was not as beautiful as the things she had once seen in Augusta. She had been to Augusta once with Jeter and Ada, and had seen with her own eyes girls who were laughing and carefree. She did not know whether they worked in the cotton mills, but it made little difference to her. Down there on the tobacco road, to one ever laughed. Down there girls had to chop cotton in the summer, pick it up in the fall, and cut firewood in the winter. Jeter pushed himself erect from the corner of the house and began moving slowly across the yard. He lifted one foot, held it in the air several seconds, and put it on the ground in front of him. He had crept up on rabbits like that many times in the woods and thickets. The wood would be sitting in a hollow log or in a hole in a gully, and Jeter would creep upon them. They would be sitting in a hollow log or in a hole in a gully, and Jeter would creep upon them so noiselessly that they had never knew how he caught them. Now he was creeping up on Love. Halfway across the yard, Jeter suddenly broke into a terrific plunge that landed him upon the sack of turnips almost as quickly as the bat of an eye. He could have waited a few minutes longer and reached it with the same ease with which he caught rabbits, but there was no time to lose now, and he was far more anxious to get the turnips than he had ever been to catch a rabbit. He hugged the sack desperately in both arms, squeezing it so tight that the watery turnip juice squirted through the loosely woven burlap in all directions. The juice squirted into his eyes, almost blinding him, but it was as pleasant to Jeter as summer rain water and far more welcome. Ada took one step forward, balancing herself against one of the porch uprights. Dude jumped to his feet, holding to the china-berry tree behind him. Love turned around just in time to see Jeter grab the sack and hug it in his arms. Ellie Mae tried to hold Love where he was, but he succeeded in twisting out of her arms and dived for Jeter and the turnips. Ellie Mae turned over just in time to clutch wildly at his foot, and he fell sprawling from mid-air to the hard ground. Each of the Lesters, without a word having been spoken, was prepared for concerted action without delay. Dude dashed across the yard towards his father. Ada ran down the porch step, and the old granddaughter was only a few feet behind her. All of them gathered around Jeter and the sack. Waiting, Ellie Mae still clung to Love's foot, pulling him back each time he succeeded in wiggling his body a few inches closer to Jeter. The tips of Love's fingers never got closer than 3 feet to the sack. I didn't tell you no lie about Ellie Mae, did I? Dude said. Didn't I tell you right, Pa? Hush up, you dude, Ada scowled. Can't you see your pa ain't got no time to talk about nothing? Jeter thrust his chin over the top of the sack and looked straight at Lav. Lav's eyes were bulging and bloodshot. He thought of the 7.5 miles he had walked that morning, all the way to the other side of the Fuller and back again, and what he saw now made him sick. Ellie Mae was doing her best to pull Love back where he had been. He was trying to get away so he could protect his turnips and keep the Lesters out of the sack. The very thing he had at first been so careful to guard against when he stopped at the house had happened so quickly he didn't know what to think about. That, however, had been before Ellie Mae began sliding her bare bottom over the sandy yard towards him. He realized now what a fool he had been, to lose his head and his turnips, too. The 3 Negroes were straining their necks to see everything. They had watched Ellie Mae and Love with growing enthusiasm until Jeter suddenly descended upon the sack, and now they were trying to guess what would happen next in the yard. Ada and the old grandmother found 2 large and heavy sticks and tried to pry Love over his back so Ellie Mae could reach him again. Love was doing anything in his power to protect his sack because he knew full well that if Jeter once got 20 steps ahead of him, he would never be able to catch him before all the turnips were eaten. Jeter was old, but he could run like a rabbit when he had to. Don't be scared of Ellie Mae, Love, Ada said. Ellie Mae ain't gonna hurt you. She's all excited, but she ain't the rough kind at all. She won't hurt you. Ada prodded him with the stick and made him stop wiggling away from Ellie Mae. She jabbed him in the ribs as hard as she could, biting her lower lip between her teeth. Them blank look like they is gonna come in the yard and help Love out, Dude said. If they come in here, I'll bust them with the rock. They ain't got no business helping Love. They ain't thinking of coming in here, Ada said. Blank has got more sense than trying to interfere with the white folks' business. They don't dare come. The colored men did not come any closer. They would have liked to help Love because they were friends of his, but they were more interested in waiting to see what Ellie Mae was going to do than they were in saving the turnips. Ellie Mae was sweating like a plow hand. Love had gotten sand all over him, and she was trying to wipe it off with the corner of her gingham Mother Hubbard and to get to him again. Love made a final desperate plunge for the sack, and although he succeeded in getting nearly a foot closer, Ada hit him on the head with a blackjack stick so hard he slumped helpless on the ground with a weak groan. Ellie Mae was upon him in a single plunge, her excited feline agility frightening him almost out of his thing. His breath had first been knocked from him by the force of Ellie Mae's weight falling on his unprotected stomach, and her knees digging into him. The pain of a mule's kick kept him from being able to breathe without sharp pains in his lungs. He was defenseless in her hold. While Ellie Mae held him, his arms pinned to the ground, Ada stood over him with her heavy blackjack pole, prepared to strike him on the head if he again tried to get up or turn over on his stomach. The old grandmother waited on the other side with her stick high and menacing above her head. She muttered under her breath all the time, but no one paid any attention to what she was trying to say. Has these turnips got them damn blasted green gut and worms in them, Love? Jeter said. By God and by Jesus, if they're wormy, I don't know what I'm going to do about it. I've been so sick of eating wormy turnips, I declare I almost lost my religion. It's a shame for God to let them damn blasted green gutter worms bore into turnips. Us poor people always get the worst end of all deals. It looks like to me, maybe he don't intend for human seed turnips at all. Maybe he wants them raised by the hogs, but he don't put nothing else down there on the land in their stead. Won't nothing but turnips grow in wintertime. Ellie Mae and Love had rolled over a dozen or more times like tumbling bugs. When they finally stopped, Love was on top. Ada had followed them across the yard, and the grandmother too, and they stood ready to club Love with the blackjack poles if he showed the first sign of trying to get up before Ellie Mae was ready to release him. While the others were in the far corner of the yard, Jeter suddenly jumped to his feet, hugging the sack of turnips tight to his stomach, and ran out across the tobacco road towards the woods beyond the old cotton field. He didn't pause to look back over his shoulder until he was nearly half a mile away. In another moment, he had disappeared into the wood. The Negroes were laughing so hard that they could not stand up straight. They were not laughing at Love. It was the action of the Lesters that appeared so funny to them. Ada's serious face and Ellie Mae's frantic determination furnished a scene none of them could look at without laughing. They waited until everyone had quieted down, and then they went slowly down the road towards Fuller, talking about what they had seen in the Lester yard. Ada and the grandmother presently went back to the porch and sat down on the steps to watch Ellie Mae and Love. There was no longer any danger of him getting away. He didn't even try to get up now. How many scoops full does that number 17 freight engine empty at the chute every morning, Love? Dude said. Looks like to me them freight engines take on nearly twice as much coal as the passenger ones do. Them firemen on the Frights is always chunking big hunks of coal at the blank cabins along the track. I reckon that's why they have to take on more coal than the passengers do. The passenger trains goes faster, and the blank firemen don't have a chance to chuck out coal at the blank cabins. I've seen near about a whole scoop full of coal chunked out of the Frights at one time. The railroad don't know nothing about it, do they? If they did, they make the firemen stop that. They throw out more coal along the tracks than engines burn. Near about it, I bet. That's why blank don't have to cut wood all the time. They all burn railroad coal in their cabins. Love was too breathless to say anything. Why don't you burn coal in your house instead of wood, Love? Nobody would know about it. I ain't gonna tell on you if you want to do that. It's a lot easier than cutting wood every day. Mother Lester, the old grandmother, sitting beside her bag of dead twigs, began groaning again and rubbing her sides with her fists. Presently she got up, lifted the bag over her shoulder, and went into the house towards the kitchen. She made a fire in the cook stove and sat down beside it to wait until the twigs burned out. She was certain Jeter would not bring any of the turnips back to her to eat. He would stay in the thicket and eat every one of them himself. While she waited for the fire to die down, she looked into the snuff jar on the shelf, but it was still empty. There had been no snuff in it for nearly a week, and Ada would not tell her where the full jar was hidden. The only time she ever had any snuff was when she accidentally found the jar hidden away somewhere, and took some before anybody could stop her. Jeter had knocked her down several times about doing that, and he had said he would kill her if he ever caught her stealing snuff again. There were times when she would have been willing to die if she could only have for once all the snuff she wanted. Why don't the firemen blow the whistles more than they do, Love? Dude said. They hardly blow the whistles at all. If I was a fireman, I'd pull the whistle cord near about all the time. They make a noise about as pretty as an automobile horn does. Dude sat on the pine stump until Love got up and staggered across the yard towards the tobacco road. Love looked all around in every direction, hoping he might see Jeter hiding somewhere close. He was sure that Jeter had gone to the pine woods beyond the old cotton field, though, and he knew it would be a waste of time trying to find him and catch him. It was too late to stop him now. Ellie Mae lay where she was, stretched out flat on the ground on her back. Perspiration had matted her hair against her forehead and neck, and her pink gingham dress was twisted under her shoulders and head in such a way that it made a pillow for her to lie on. Her mouth looked as if it had been torn. Her flaming red upper gum looked like a bleeding, painful wound under her left nostril. Her divided lip quivered, and her body trembled. You ought to give me them overalls when you're done with them, Dude said. I ain't had a new pair of overalls since I can remember. Pa says he's going to buy me some. Me and him both some one of these days when he sells a lot of wood, but I ain't putting none too much trust in what he says. He ain't going to sell no wood, not more than a load at a time. No way. He tells more lies than any man I ever heard of. I reckon he'd rather lie about it than haul wood to Augusta. He's that lazy he won't get up off the ground sometimes when he stumbles. I've seen him stay there near about an hour before he got up. He's the laziest son of a bitch I ever seen. Love went to the middle of the road and stood there uncertainly, his legs wide apart to keep his balance and his body swaying backward and forward like a drunken man. He began brushing the sand off his clothes and shaking it out of his hair. Sand was in his pocket and shoes, and even his ears were full of it. When is you going to buy yourself an automobile, Love? Dude asked. You make a lot of money at the shoot. You ought to buy yourself a great big car like the ones the rich people in Augusta has got. I'll show you how to run it. I know all about automobiles. Pa's old Ford ain't much to look at now, but when it was in good running order, I used to run the wheels off of it sometimes near about. You ought to get one that has got a great big horn on it. Whistles a horn make a pretty sound, don't they, Love? When is you going to get an automobile? Love stood in the middle of the road for the next 10 or 15 minutes, looking out over the top of the sagging brown broom sedge towards the thicket where Jeter was. After he had waited until he did not know what else to do, he staggered up the road in the direction of his house and the coal chute. Pearl would be at the house when he reached it, but as soon as he walked inside, she would run out the back door and stay until he left. Even if she did not leave the room when he entered the house, she would not look at him nor have anything to say. He could look at her long yellow hair hanging down her back, but that was all. She would not allow him to come close enough to look into her eyes. Even if he tried to do that, she would certainly run off into the broom sedge. Ada and Dude watched him until he was out of sight beyond the rise in the ridge, and they had turned their backs and looked at Ellie Mae in the yard. Dude went to the pine stump and sat down to watch the red wood ants crawl over the stomach and breasts of his sister. The muscles of her legs and back twitched nervously for a while, and then slowly the jerking stopped altogether. and she lay still. Her mouth was partly open, and her upper lip looked as if it had been torn wider apart than it naturally was. The perspiration had dried on her forehead and cheeks, and smudges of dirt were streaked over her pale white skin. For nearly an hour she slept deeply in the warm February sun, and when she awoke, her right arm was lying across her mouth where Jude had placed it when he left the yard to get some of the turnips before his father had eaten them all. Chapter 5. Down in the thicket, hidden from the house and the road by the 4-foot wall of brown broom sedge, Jeter's conscience began to bother him. His hunger had been abated temporarily, and his overall pockets were filled with turnips, but the slowly formed realization that he had stolen his son-in-law's food sickened his body and soul. He had stolen food before, food and everything else he had the opportunity to take, but each time as now he regretted what he had done until he could convince himself that he had not done anything so terribly wrong. Sometimes he could do this in a few minutes, at other times it was days and even weeks before he was satisfied that God had forgiven him and would not punish him too much. The sound of Dude's voice behind him in the woods was like the voice of God calling him to punishment. Dude had been crashing through the thicket and beating the underbush with a blackjack stick for the past half hour trying to find Jeter before all the turnips had been eaten. There was a hollow silence in the woods around Jeter between Dude's yells, and Jeter felt humble and penitent. He carefully wiped the blade of the knife with which he had pared the turnips and thrust it into his pocket. Then he jumped up and ran out the thicket and into the broom sedge. He could see the roof of the house and the top of the chinaberry trees, but he had no way of knowing whether Love had gone home. Dude saw him the moment he came out of the thunderbush and started through the sedge. "Hey, where are you running off to now?" Dude shouted at him, running across the field to cut Jeter off from the house. Jeter stopped and waited for Dude to reach him. He took out half a dozen of the smallest tulips and laid them in Dude's outstretched hands. "What made you run off and try to eat them all for and not give me none?" Dude demanded. "You ain't the only one that likes turnips. I ain't had no more to eat this week than you has. You're as mean as an old snake at times. Why did you want me to have none?" "The good Lord is against theft," Jeter said. "He don't make no provision for the future for them that steals. They has got to look out for themselves in the afterlife. Now I gotta get right with God and confess my sins. I done an evil deed this day. God don't like for his people to do that. He won't take no notice of sinners, and theft is the worst deed a human can do near about." "Hell," Dude said. "You talk like that near about every time you steal something, but you don't never stick to it afterwards. You're just trying to keep from giving me some more turnips. You can't fool me. That's a sinful thing to say about a man who's tried all his life to stand right with God. God's on my side, and he don't like to hear people talk about me in that manner. You ought not to talk like that, Dude. Ain't you got no sense at all?" "Give me some more," Dude said. "Ain't no use for you to try to keep them all by talking like that. That ain't gonna get you nowhere. That don't mean nothing to me. I know better than to get fooled this time." "You've already had 5, ain't you?" Jeter said, counting the ones he had left in his pockets. "You don't need no more." Dude thrust his hands into the nearest pocket and jerked out as many as he could hold in his hand. Jeter hit at him with his elbows, but Dude did not mind that. Jeter was too weak to hurt him. "That's all you're gonna have," Jeter said. "I'm taking what's left and give to Ada and Ellie Mae. I expect they be almost as hungry as I was. They'll be waiting now to get some. Has Love gone yet?" "He went back to the chute long ago," Dude said. They started walking through the broom sedge toward the house. Long before they reached the road, they could see Ada and Ellie Mae waiting in the yard for them. The grandmother was crouching in the doorway, afraid to come out any further. "I reckon the women folks is pretty hungry too," Dude said. "Ellie Mae's belly was growling all last night. It woke me up this morning, starting all over again." Ellie Mae and Ada sat down on the steps when Dude and Jeter came into view. They waited patiently while Dude and Jeter broke through the broom sedge, and as they came nearer, Ada went up on another step. The grandmother crouched in the doorway, clinging to the frame with both hands. None of them was more hungry than she was. There was another woman on the porch, too. She sat swaying backward and forward in the rocking chair and singing a hymn at the top of her voice. Each time she reached the highest note she could go, she held it until her breath gave out, and then she started all over again. Jeter jumped over the drain ditch and came across the yard with Dude at his heels. As soon as he saw the woman in the rocking chair, his face brightened, and he almost stumbled in his haste to reach her. "The good Lord be praised," he shouted, seeing Bessie Rice sitting on the porch. "I know God would send his angel to take away my sins. Sister Bessie, the Lord knows what I needed all right. He wants me to give up my sinful ways, don't he?" Ada and Ellie Mae jerked at Jeter's overalls pockets, extracting the remaining turnips in a desperate hurry. Jeter tossed 3 of the smallest ones on the porch in the direction of the door. The grandmother fell on her knees and clutched them hungrily against her stomach while she munched the vegetable with her toothless gums. "The Lord told me to come to the Lester house," the woman preacher said. "I was at home sweeping out the kitchen when they came to me and said, 'Sister Bessie, Jeter Lester is doing something evil. You go to his place and pray for him right now before it's too late and try to make him give up his evil going on.' I looked right back at the Lord and said, 'Lord, Jeter Lester is a powerful, sinful man, but I'll pray for him until the devil goes clear back to hell.' That's what I told him, and here I is. I come to pray for you and yours, Jeter Lester. Maybe it ain't too late yet to get on the good side of the Lord. It's people like you who ought to be good instead of letting the devil make you do all sorts of sinful things." "I know the good Lord wouldn't let me slip and fall back into the devil's hands," Jeter shouted, dancing around Bessie's chair. I knowed it. I always been on God's side, even when things was the blackest, and I knowed he'd jerk me out to hell before it was too late. I ain't no sinner by nature, Sister Bessie. It's just the old devil who's always hounding me to do a little something bad, but I ain't going to do it. I want to go to heaven when I die." "Ain't you going to give me a turnip, Jeter?" she said. "I ain't had so much to eat lately. Times is hard for the good and the bad alike, though I sometimes think that's not just exactly right. The good ought never to be hard put to it, like the sinful ought to be all the time." "Sure, Bessie," Jeter said, giving her several turnips. He selected the largest ones he could find. "I know how you like to eat, about as bad as the rest of us. I wish I had something to give you to take home. When I had plenty, I used to give Brother Rice a whole armful of chickens and sweet potatoes at a time. Now I ain't got nothing but a handful of measly little turnips, but I ain't ashamed of them. The Lord growed them. His doings is good enough for me. Ain't they for you?" Sister Bessie smiled happily at Jeter and his family. She was always happy when she could pray for a sinner and save him from the devil, because she had been a sinner herself before Brother Rice chased the devil out of her and married her. Her husband was dead now, though, and she was carrying on his work in the Sandhills. He had left her $800 in insurance money when he died the summer before, and she was saving it to carry on his work when the time came that it was needed the most. She had the money in a bank in Augusta. Some of the people in the Sandhills said the kind of religion Sister Bessie talked about was far from being God's idea of what what consecrated people should say and do. Every time she heard it, Bessie always said that the other people did not know any more about God's religion than the male preachers who talked about it knew. Most of them belonged to no sect at all, while the rest were hard-shell Baptists. Bessie hated hard-shell Baptists with the same intensity with which she hated the devil. There was no church building to house Bessie's congregations, nor was there an organized band of communicants to support her. She went from house to house in the Sandhills, mostly along the crest of the ridge where the old tobacco road was, and prayed for people who needed prayer and wanted it. She was past 35, almost 40, and she was much better looking than most women in the Sandhills, except for her nose. Bessie's nose had failed to develop properly. There was no bone in it, and there was no top to it. The nostrils were exposed, and Dude had once said that when he looked at her nose, it was like looking down the end of a double-barreled shotgun. Bessie was sensitive about the appearance of it, and she tried to keep people from staring at her and commenting on what they saw. Ada had already told Bessie about her turnips Jeter took from Law. Bessie had come prepared to pray for Jeter for his sins in general, but she was glad she had a specific sin to pray for him to God about. Prayer always did a man more good, she said, if there was something he was ashamed of. First of all, though, she finished eating all the turnips Jeter would let her have. "I wish Lav was here so I could ask for his forgiveness," Jeter said. "I reckon I'll have to go down to his house the first thing in the morning and tell him how powerful sorry I am. I hope he ain't so mad about it that he'll try to beat me with a stick. He's got a whooping big temper when he gets good and mad about something." "Let's have a little prayer," Bessie said, swallowing the last of the turnip. "The good Lord be praised," Jeter said. "I'm sure glad you came when you did, Sister Bessie, because I'm needing prayer about as bad as I ever did. I was a sinful man today. The Lord don't take up with humans who commit theft. I don't know what made me so bad. I reckon the old devil just came along and got the upper hand on me." Everyone got down on his knees except for Ellie Mae and Dude. They sat on the steps, eating and watching. "You know," Bessie said, "some people make an objection to kneeling down and having prayer out of doors. They don't like to have me pray for them on the front porch or in the yard. They say, 'Sister Bessie, can't we go in the house out of sight and pray? They're just as good.' And do you know what I tell them? I say, 'Brothers and sisters, I ain't ashamed to pray Pray out here in the open. I want folks passing along the road to know I'm on God's side. I ain't ashamed to let folks see me pray. It's the old devil that's always whispering about going in the house out of sight. That's the way I would stick up for the Lord. I need to write down and pray in the big road just as loud as I do in the schoolhouse or at a camp meeting. I ain't ashamed to pray in front of the yard or on the porch. It's the old devil who's always telling folks to go in the house out of sight. The good Lord be praised, Jeter said. Let's get ready to pray, she said. Ada and Jeter bowed their heads and closed their eyes. Mother Lester felt in the doorway, but she did not close her eyes. She stared straight ahead of her, out over the field of brown broom sedge. Dear God, here I is again to offer a little prayer for sinful people. Jeter Lester and his family want me to pray for them again. The last time helped them a whole lot, and if it wasn't for Jeter getting in the clutch of the devil today, there wouldn't be no need for prayer this soon again. But Jeter let the devil get a hold of him, and he went and done a powerful, sinful thing. He stole all the lofts turnips and wouldn't give them back. They're all eaten up now, so it's too late to take them alive. That's why we want to pray for Jeter. You ought to make him stop stealing like he does. I never seen a more stealing man in all my days. It looks like he takes to stealing just as naturally as one of us takes a drink of water. But Jeter wants to quit. Though it seems like he goes and does it again almost as soon as we get through praying for him. You ought to make him quit in this time for good and all. Ain't no sense in you letting a man just keep on doing a sinful thing all the time. You ought to put a stop to it and not let him do it no more. You ain't gonna let the old devil tell you what to do, is you? There ain't no way for the Lord to do. The Lord ought to tell the devil to get away and stop trying to tempt good folks. And Sister Ada has got the pleurisy again pretty bad. You ought to do something for her, sure enough. The last time didn't help her none too much. She can't do all her household work when she got pleurisy so bad. If you'll make her well of it, she'll quit the devil for all time. Won't you, Sister Ada? Yes, Lord. And old Mother Jeter has got a misery in her ideas. She's in pain all the time with it. She's kneeling down right now, but she's in such pain she can't do it many more times. You ought to bless Ellie Mae too. Ellie Mae has got that slit in her lip that makes her an awful sight to look at. If you was to don't forget to pray for Pearl, Sister Bessie, Jeter said. Pearl needs praying for something awful. What has Pearl done sinful, Brother Jeter? Well, that was what Love wanted to speak to me about today. He says Pearl won't talk to him, and she won't let him touch her. When night comes, she gets down and sleeps on a darn pallet on the floor. Love has got to sleep in the bed by himself and can't get her to take no interest in him. That's a pretty bad thing for a wife to do, and God ought to make her quit it. Love is due some rights. A woman ain't got no business sleeping on the darn pallet on the floor, ain't? No way. Maybe she knows best, Brother Jeter, Bessie said. Maybe Pearl's going to have a little baby, and that's her way of telling Brother Love about it. No, it ain't that, Sister Bessie. Love says he ain't never slept with her yet. He says he ain't never touched her yet, neither. That's what worrying him so darn much. He wants her to sleep in the bed with him and stop getting down on that darn pallet on the floor every night like she does. Pearl needs praying for her to make her quit that sleeping down there on the floor. Brother Jeter, little girls like Pearl don't know how to live married lives like we grown-up women do. So maybe if I talked to her myself instead of getting God to do it, she would change her ways. I expect I know more about what to tell her than he does because I've been a married woman up to the past summer when my former husband died. I expect I know all about it. God wouldn't know what to tell her. That might help some, but if I was a praying kind myself, I reckon I'd sort of tell God about it. Maybe he would do some good. Maybe he's run across gals like that before. Though I don't believe there's another darn girl in the whole country who's as contrary-minded about sleeping in the bed as Pearl is. Dude picked up the baseball and began tossing it on the roof of the porch and catching it when it rolled down the yard. The ball knocked loose the rotten shingles, and pieces of them showered the yard. Ellie Mae sat waiting to hear some more prayer when Bessie and Jeter got through talking about Pearl. Maybe it wouldn't hurt none if I was to mention it, Bessie said. That's right, Jeter said. You speak to the Lord about it too. Both of you together ought to get something done about it. Now, Lord, I've got something special to pray about. I don't ask favors unless they is things I want pretty bad. So this time I'm asking for a favor for Pearl. I want you to make her stop sleeping on a pallet on the floor while Brother Love has to sleep by himself in the bed. Make Pearl get in the bed, Lord, and make her stay there where she belongs. She ain't got no right to sleep on a pallet on the floor when Love's got a bed for her. Now you make her stop acting like she's been and put her in the bed when night comes. I was a good wife to my former husband. I never slept on no pallet on the floor. Sister Ada here don't do nothing like that. And when I marry another man, I ain't gonna do that neither. I'm gonna get in the bed just as big as my new husband does. So you tell Pearl to quit that. We women knows what we ought to do, and Pearl just ain't old enough to know better. You gotta tell her to quit doing that. If it was, what was that you were saying about getting married, Sister Bessie? Jeter asked. Didn't I hear you say you was going to marry yourself to a new husband? Who's you going to get married to? Well, I ain't made up my mind yet. I've been looking around some, though. Right now, it looks like I can't make up my mind. It's my wish to find a man who's got some goods and possessions. But it looks like ain't nobody got nothing around here no more. All the men folks is poor. Now, if it wasn't for Ada there, Jeter said. Brother Jeter, you hush your mouth, she giggled. You make me feel so funny when you talk like that. How'd you know I'd take to you? You're pretty old, ain't you? I reckon you better finish up the prayer, he said. Ada, there, gets sort of peeved when I talk about marrying another woman. Save us from the devil and make a place for us in heaven. Amen. Chapter 6. You clear forgot to say a little prayer for Dude, Jeter said suddenly. You left Dude out all around Bessie. Dude, he's as big a sinner as the rest of us, Lester. Bessie jumped up and ran out into the yard. She clutched Dude by the arm and dragged him to the porch by her chair. She kneeled down in front of it and tried to pull Dude down beside her. I don't want to do that, Dude said angrily. I don't want no praying for me. I ain't done nothing. Pa did all the stealing of Lav's turnips. He took them all and ran off to his thicket. Bessie took his hands in hers and stroked his arms for several minutes without speaking. Then she stood up beside him and locked her arms around his waist. She squeezed him so hard it made the blood rush to his head. I gotta pray for you, Dude. The Lord told me all you Lesters were sinful. He didn't leave you out no more than he did Ellie Mae. Dude looked into her face. She pleaded convincingly enough to make him want to be prayed for, but he could not stop looking down into her nostrils. What are you laughing at, Dude? She said. Nothing, he snickered, twisting his head until he could see almost behind himself. There ain't nothing about prayer to laugh at, Dude, she said. All of us has got to have it, sometime or another. He felt ill at ease, standing so close to her. The way she stroked his arms and shoulders with her hands made him nervous, but he could not stand still. Quit that jumping up and down, Dude, Jeter said. Well, it's you. Bessie drew her arms tighter around his waist and smiled at him. You kneel down beside me and let me pray for you. You'll do that, won't you, Dude? He put his arms around her neck and began rubbing her as she was rubbing him. Hell, he said, snickering again. I don't give a damn if I do. I knowed you would want me to pray for you, Dude, she said. It'll help you to get shed of your sins like Jeter did. They knelt down on the porch floor beside the chair. Dude continued to rub her shoulders, and Bessie kept her arms around him. Jeter was sitting on the floor beside them, leaning against the wall of the house and waiting to hear the prayer for Dude. Dear God, I'm asking you to save Brother Dude from the devil and make him a place for him in heaven. That's all. Amen. Bessie stopped praying, but neither she nor Dude made an effort to stand up. Praise the Lord, Jeter said. But that was a dumb short prayer for a sinner like Dude. Dude don't need no more praying for. He's just a boy and he's not sinful like us grown-ups. He ain't sinful like you is, Jeter. Well, maybe you right, Jeter said, but Dude, he cusses all the time at me and his ma. He ain't got no respect for none of us. Maybe that's as it should be. But I sort of recollect the Bible saying a son shouldn't cuss his ma and pa like he does other people. Nobody never told me no different, but somehow it doesn't seem right for him to do that. I've seen him pestering Ellie Mae with a stick too, and I know that ain't right. That's sinful, and it ought to be prayed about. Dude won't do that again, Bessie said, stroking Dude's hair. He's a fine boy. Dude is. He would make a handsome preacher too. He's mighty like my former husband in his younger days. I sort of feel there ain't much difference between them now. Ada twisted around to see why Dude was sitting on the porch. He and Bessie were still kneeling down beside the chair with their arms around each other. Dude's 16 years old now, Jeter said. That makes him 2 years younger than Ellie Mae. Well, pretty soon he'll be getting a wife, I reckon. All my other male children married early in life, just like the gals done. When Dude gets married, I won't have none of my children left with me except Ellie Mae, and I don't reckon she'll ever find a man to marry her. It's all on account of that mouth she's got. I've been thinking I'd take her up to Augusta and get a doctor to sew her lip. She married quick enough then, but she's got a powerful way with her, woman-like. Ain't nothing wrong with her except that slit in her lip. If it wasn't for that, she'd been married as quick as Pearl was. Men here around Fuller all want to marry gals about 11 or 12 years old, like Pearl was. There was just turning 12 when I married her. The Lord intended all of us should be mated, Bessie said. He made us that way. That's why my former husband used to say. I'd tell him that a man needs a woman, and he'd say a woman needs a man. My former husband was just like the Lord in that respect. They both believed in the same thing when it came to mating. I reckon the Lord didn't intend for all of us to get mated, Jeter said. But he didn't take into account a woman with a slit in her mouth like Ellie Mae's got. I don't believe he's done the right thing by her when he opened her lip like that. That's the only contrary thing I ever said about the Lord, but it's the truth. What use is a slit like that for? You can't spit through it and you can't whistle through it, now can you? It was just meanness on his part when he done that. That's what it is. Dumb meanness. You shouldn't talk about the Lord like that. He knows what he's done it for. He knows everything. He wouldn't have done it if he didn't have a good purpose in mind. He knows what he makes men and women for. He made Ellie Mae's face like that with a good reason in mind. Yeah, the best reason in the world for doing it. What reason? Maybe I ought not to say it, Jeter. It ain't no secret between you and the Lord, is it, Sister Bessie? No, ain't no secrets between us. But I know. You know what? Why he made her lips slit open. Ain't you gonna tell me? Brother Jeter, he done that to her lip to save her pure body from the wicked men. What man? I'm the only man around here. It's you, Brother Jeter. I ain't wicked. I'm sinful at rare times, but I never been wicked. It's all the same to God. It don't make no difference to him which it is. What did I do? I don't see how stealing a few measly turnips and sweet potatoes once in a while has anything to do with Ellie Mae's face. Brother Jeter, the Lord done that to her lip to save her pure body from being ruined by you. He know that she would be safe in this house when he made her face like that. He know that you was once powerful sinner and that you might again if that's the truth, Jeter said. I used to be a powerful sinful man in my time. I reckon I was at one time the most powerful sinful man in the whole country. Now, you take them Peabody children over across the field. I reckon clear near about all of them is half mine one way or another. And then I used to. You wait till I finish accusing you, Jeter, before you start lying out of it. I ain't lying out of it, Bessie. I just now told you how powerful, sinful I was. There was a man and his wife moved here from, as I was saying, you didn't keep none of it hid from the Lord. But Henry Peabody didn't know nothing about it, though he knowed that you might take it into your head to ruin Ellie Mae. The Lord knows everything, and he's got his reasons. He know that you was such a powerful, sinful man long years ago, and you wouldn't have obeyed him if he told you to take your eyes out, if your eyes offended him. Looking at her slit with my eyes won't offend nobody. He don't care about my eyes. What would he want to take them out for? Just like I was saying, if the Lord had told you to cut out your eyes because they offended him, you wouldn't have done it. That showed you was a powerful sinner. Or if he had told you to cut off your hand or your ears for the same reason, you would not have obeyed him. And he knowed if he told you to stop fooling with Ellie Mae, you wouldn't have cut off the root of the evil like he said do. That's the reason he sent Ellie Mae into the world with a slit in her lip. He figured she would be safe from a sinner like you because you wouldn't like the looks of her. The Lord be praised, Jeter said. You sure have opened my eyes to the way of God. I never knowed that before, I declare. If I had knowed it, I sure would have cut myself off when I was fooling around over there at Peabody's. Then if I had done that, Ellie Mae wouldn't look like she does now, would she, Bessie? It's just like I said, the Lord knows more about us humans ways than we do. I've been a powerful, sinful man in my time, I reckon. I never knowed I ought to cut myself off before. Maybe it's not too late now. I sure don't want to let the devil get a hold of me. Bessie turned to Jude again, smiling at him and holding her arms tighter around his neck. Jude did not know what to do next. He liked to touch her and feel her, and he wanted her to hug him some more as she had done. He liked to feel her arms tight around him and have her rub him. Yet he could not believe that Bessie was hugging him for any real reason. She had stopped praying 15 minutes before, but she still made no motion to release him and make him get up. Say, Sister Bessie, Jeter said, leaning forward and squinting his eyes under his heavy black brows, what in the hell is you and Dude doing there? You and him has been squatting there hugging and rubbing off the other for near about half an hour. Dude hoped she would not make him get up because he liked to feel her pull him tight to her breast and squeeze him in his arms. Bessie tried to stand up, but Dude would not let her. She sat down again beside him on the floor, running her fingers through his hair. Darn if I ever saw a woman preacher take on like that before, Jeter said, shaking his head. Looks like to me like you ain't going to do no more praying today. You and Dude is hugging and rubbing off the other, ain't you? By God and by Jesus, if it ain't so. Bessie got up and sat down in the chair. She tried to make Dude go away, but he stood in front of her, waiting for her to touch him. The Lord was speaking to me, she said. He was telling me I ought to marry a new husband. I can't get around much by myself, and if I was to get married to a man, maybe I could do more preaching and praying. The Lord would turn him into a preacher too, and both of us could travel around spreading the gospel. He didn't tell you to marry Dude, did he? Dude ain't no preacher. He ain't got sense enough to be one. He wouldn't know what to preach about when the time came to get up and say something. Dude would make a fine preacher," she interrupted. "Dude would be just about as good at preaching and praying as my former husband was. Maybe better. The Lord and me could show him how to do it. It ain't hard at all after you catch on to it. I wish I was in my younger days. If I was, I could maybe do it myself with you. I could do it. Yet only Ada there has got... So she don't want me fooling around with women folks no more. I know I could do as fine preaching and praying as the next one. It ain't that's what's holding me back. It's Ada there. She's got a queer notion that I might take to fooling with women folks. Well, I ain't saying I wouldn't if I had half a chance, neither." "It would require a younger man for me to be satisfied," Bessie said. "Dude there is just suitable for practicing and living with me, ain't you, Dude?" "You want me to go home with you now?" he said. "I gotta pray over it first, Dude. When I come back here the next time, I'll let you know. You'll have to wait until I can ask the Lord if you'll do. He's sometimes particular about his male preachers, especially if they're going to marry women preachers." Bessie ran down the steps over the hard white sand of the yard. When she reached the tobacco road, she turned around and looked at the Lesters on the front porch several minutes. Presently, without waiting to walk, she began running through the deep white sand toward her house 2 miles away on the bluff above the savannah. Bessie's home, a tenant house of 3 rooms and a corn crib, sat on the edge of bluff. That was where the country dropped down into the swampy Savannah River Valley. The house, covered with unpainted weatherboards, sat precariously on 3 piles of thin stones. The 4th pile had fallen down 10 or 12 years before, making one end of the house sag to the ground. "Well," Jeter said, "Sister Bessie is up to something all right. It looks like to me. She's got her head set on marrying Dude there. I never seen such hugging and rubbing of the other as them two was doing. Something is going to come off of it. Something is bound to happen." Dude snickered and stood behind a chinaberry tree so nobody can see him. Ellie Mae watched him from behind the pine stump, smiling because she had heard what Bessie said. Jeter sat looking out over the old field of the brown broom sedge and wondering if he could borrow a mule somewhere and raise a crop that year. The time for spring plowing had already arrived, and it made him restless. He did not like to sit idly on the porch and let the spring pass without burning and plowing. He had decided that he could at least burn over the fields, even if he did not yet know how he could make a mule and seed cotton and guano. He would have gone out then and set the broom sedge on fire, but he felt comfortable where he was, and the burning of the fields could wait until the next day. There was plenty of time left yet. It would not take him long to put in a crop when once he got started. Now that he was alone, he began to worry all over again about the way he had treated Love. He wanted to do something to make amends. If he went down to the chute the next morning and told Love how sorry he was and that he promised never to steal anything from him again, he hoped that Love would forgive him and not try to hit him with chunks of coal. And while he was about it, he could stop by Love's house and speak to Pearl. He would tell her that she had to stop sleeping on the pallet on the floor and be more considerate of what Love wants. It was bad enough he knew to have to put up with a woman all day long, and then when night came to be left alone was even worse. "Ain't you gonna haul no more wood to Augusta?" Ada demanded. "I ain't had no new snuff here since I don't know when, and all the meal is gone, and the meat too. Ain't nothing in the house to you." "I'm aiming to take a load over there tomorrow or the next day," Jeter said. "Don't hurry me, woman. It takes a heap of time to get ready to make a trip over there. I got my own interests to consider. You keep out of it. You're just lazy. That's what's wrong with you. If you wasn't lazy, you could haul a load every day, and I'd have me some snuff when I wanted it most." "I gotta be thinking about farming the land," Jeter said. "I ain't no darn wood chopper. I'm a farmer. Them wood choppers hauling wood to Augusta ain't got no farthing to take up their time. Like I has. Why, I expect I'm going to grow near about 50 bales of cotton this year if I can borrow the mules and get some seed cotton and guano on credit and fully. By God and by Jesus, I'm a farmer. I ain't got no darn wood chopper." "That's the way you talk every year about this time, but you don't ever get started. It's been 7 or 8 years since you turned a furrow. I've been listening to you talk about taking up farming again so long I don't believe nothing you say now. It's a big old whooping lie. All you men is like that. There's 100 more just like you all around here too. None of you is going to do nothing except talk. The rest of them go around begging, but you're so lazy you won't even do that." "Now I die," Jeter said. "I'm going to start in the morning. Soon as I get all the fields burned off, I'll go borrow me some mules. Me and Duke can grow a bale to the acre. If I can get some weed seed cotton and guano." "Humph," Ada said, leaving the porch. End of chapters 4 to 6.